So I assume most of you have heard of Stranger Things, at least those of you who have not been on Mars, in a cave, with your fingers in your ears and your eyes shut. But if you are not among Earth's Martian exiles, you might have noticed that Stranger Things uses a lot of Dungeons and Dragons. You'll note that a lot of creatures in Stranger Things have the same names as creatures in Dungeons and Dragons, as the kids of Hawkins, Indiana. I think it's Indiana. I'm Canadian, I don't have to know these things. The kids of Hawkins, wherever the hell, use the names of familiar Dungeons and Dragons creatures to quantify the unusual beings that they are encountering. These Stranger Things are given familiar names. That's why they named the show that, and there's no possible way for you to prove me wrong. However, this unusual pairing of the Stranger Things and the names of Dungeons and Dragons things has caused me to think. It has really revved up my Dungeon Master brain in Storytelling Department B, and has led me to wonder, could you recreate a Dungeons and Dragons campaign based on the actions of the creatures in Stranger Things using their Dungeons and Dragons counterparts? And that's what I endeavor to do today. We are going to craft a Dungeons & Dragons campaign, or a one-shot probably, it could be a longer campaign. We'll get to that later. We are going to craft a campaign that features Vecna, Demogorgon, and Mind Flayer, and how we would put that together to best replicate the machinations of Vecna, Demogorgon, and the Mind Flayer in Stranger Things. And we're going to do it with lore accuracy. So join me, dear viewers, for my maddest madness yet, as we reconstruct Stranger Things in the Forgotten Realms. Now, first, some ground rules. I will not be doing any of the heroic characters in Stranger Things. That means that the entire group, the plucky youngsters, their cool elder teenaged friends, none of those are creatures I'm concerned with. As far as I'm concerned, every protagonist in the show is a player character, and a Dungeon Master does not control those actions. My primary concerns are the enemies, the antagonists, and the world. And speaking of enemies, antagonists, and the world, let's meet our antagonists. And I suppose before I get into this, I should warn everybody, there are spoilers for Stranger Things ahead. Watch the damn show. It's a cultural touchstone. What, you think you're too good for TV series on Netflix? Who the hell do you think you are? Anyways, moving on. Now, our first antagonist, our first enemy, is Demogorgon, and he's less of a what and more of a who, because Demogorgon is the Prince of Demons, or at least one of the Princes of Demons. And I suppose I should be more clear, he is in fact a they, because Demogorgon is in fact two creatures. See those two heads on the top of his bizarre, chaotic body? They both have names and separate personalities. In fact, they war with each other constantly. The left head is Amiul, and the right head is Heth-Radiah. And our boy Demogorgon here, we're just gonna call them Demogorgon from here on out to keep things simpler, is a major player in the Abyss. A powerful, chaotic being, the firm embodiment of total chaos, even at war with itself, can cause madness by being in its mere presence. And if you catch its eye, you may lose your mind completely. They are a serious demon lord, and there is only one of them. There's only one Demogorgon. Something that's going to become a problem for us going on, because in Stranger Things, Demogorgon is... So yeah, obviously suffice to say the power gap between Stranger Things Demogorgon and Dungeons & Dragons lore Demogorgon is so wide you could fit an ocean liner through it, but I can hardly blame the Stranger Things writers. If Demogorgon in Stranger Things was even an ounce as powerful as Demogorgon in Dungeons & Dragons, it would have ended in the first season after his wild, two-headed, madness-inducing face made all those poor kids' brains leak out their ears while they babbled nonsense. So, obviously they had to dumb him down a little bit in order for the series to go on. But that's not even the only problem. The problem is, in Stranger Things, Demogorgon is a multitude. There are multiple Demogorgons. There are, I think, 12 throughout the series? That might be a high number. There's a lot of Demogorgons, is what I'm saying. But these problems are not insurmountable. Remember, the lore has our back in this, and we can sort these things out to create our lore-accurate Stranger Things campaign. and we will get there in time. But for now, we need to discuss our next antagonist. And next up, we have Vecna. Vecna arguably makes kind of a glow-up in his appearance in Stranger Things versus traditional Vecna in D&D 5th edition. That might just be my take. Longtime viewers of the channel might know I don't have a great opinion of Vecna. He's undeniably popular, despite the fact that he barely features in most of the adventures he's famous for. I've always found Vecna to be utterly lacking in character. His motivations are silly, his goals are boring. Yes, he wants to become a death god, or a god. It must be really sad for him to spend his entire lifetime striving for something that Merkel got handed because he was the third guy in line. Vecna should truly consider packing up all this evil plan stuff and just see if he can show up to Jergal's place when it's career day. It would be a lot simpler, but I should probably let everyone know, for those of you not fully initiated into the cult of Vecna, Vecna is an ancient human wizard from the old times in the early days of D&D. Back in Greyhawk, because everyone is from Greyhawk. The short version is, he's a very powerful wizard, he becomes a lich, he's betrayed by his heterosexual life mate Kaz, and then he becomes a god, and then doesn't become a god because the universe keeps calling backsies, and he's got this plan and that plan about getting body parts back that he lost back when he was fighting Kaz. It's a whole long story, and I go through the whole thing in my takedown of Vecna that you can watch on my channel. So Vecna, big, powerful lich, has aspirations to become a god, and almost any and all plans he ever has are to further this goal, to achieve godhood in whatever way that he can. And then we have Stranger Things Vecna. And I guess this is where things become a little difficult, because I honestly can't articulate, or at least I'm having a bit of trouble articulating, exactly what Stranger Things Vecna wants. AKA Harvey Creel, AKA One, AKA Mr. What's-It.
That's too many names.
AKA Vecna. And it's a real shame that I'm having trouble articulating, because that's kind of the whole point of the freaking video. Alright, let's do our best here. So, Vecna. Stranger Things Vecna. We're going to get a bit into spoilers here, so if you're not caught up on Stranger Things, or if you don't know all the plot points of what's going on, be careful going forward here. So, Vecna, Stranger Things Vecna. I'm just going to call him Henry from here on out to make things easier. Henry is a upper middle class boy in the 50s, and he's a Boy Scout, and he travels out into the Arizona landscape one day and happens upon a strange case held by a guy with a gun, and he murks that guy, and in the case there's some wibbly wobbly magic dust from the Mind Flayer that gives him some psychic powers. Now, after getting these psychic powers, Henry decides that murdering people is a lot like potato chips in that you can't stop with just one, and eventually he has murked almost every member of his family, a small selection of local animals, and depending on whether or not you watch the musical, a handful of townspeople. So after that, Dr. Brenner decides naturally I gotta get a load of this kid and abducts him into the Hawkins lab, where he is as well behaved there as he was out in the real world, and eventually they put a little chip inside his arm to make sure that he can't do so much psychic murder. Then while they're at it for ha-has, they decide it'd be a good idea to take a bunch of Henry's blood and transfuse it into a bunch of pregnant women to make a little army of psychic children to use against the Soviets. And honestly, that's probably the most believable part about the whole Henry plot and plan things. Man, the Americans would get up to any nonsense to fight the Soviets. Just look up the crazy stuff that was approved by the US military to fight the Soviets. It's insane. This is tame by comparison. Gotta spend that military budget somehow. So anyways, Henry gets to keep hanging around Hawkins' lab just with his special no psychic powers chip stuck in his arm, which seems like a strange oversight, but I guess they just really enjoy his company. And he hangs out and watches all the psychic children come into their new powers until he notices one particularly powerful child, 11, and tricks her into removing his chip, and he decides that it's been a long time since he's had a murder and he's justifiably hungry and decides to murder everybody else in the lab. 11, upset at this and the whole getting tricked thing, sends him to the Shadow Realm, or I guess as we call it in the Stranger Things canon, Dimension X. And after being banished to the Shadow Realm, Dimension X, Henry becomes Vecna full and proper. He's hit with a bunch of lightning, he encounters the Mind Flayer and its full, smoky, strange creature glory, and this is the first time that he starts to have anything approaching a plan besides kill everything with psychic powers and never stop. So he meets with the Mind Flayer Flayer discovers a crazy wormhole that connects Mind Flayer Dimension X to Hawkins, Indiana. I think it's Indiana. Whatever, I'm Canadian, I don't need to know. And Henry and the Mind Flayer get together and decide it's about time that two worlds become one. So they endeavor on a plan to merge Dimension X, Mind Flayer Dimension, with Hawkins through murder and intense psychic powers. And this is where it all gets a bit strange, because the whole plan is a bit hand-wavy, but then again that kind of works in our favor. What is hand-wavy psychic powers in Stranger Things can be hand-wavy magic powers in Dungeons & Dragons. So we'll get back to this a little bit later. For now, we need to talk about the Mind Flayer. So, in Stranger Things, the Mind Flayer is this looming evil that hangs over everything, never fully characterized, often reduced to little more than a shadowy cardboard cutout that tells Henry to kill things. Its most notable appearance is the attack on the mall in Season 2, which I suppose is something that we should talk about, because now that the series is wrapped up, and we're getting into spoiler territory here, so I'm warning you again, the Mind Flayer has been characterized as the being that wants to use Henry to get to our world. So what the hell was it doing in Season 2? It seemed to have manifested itself almost fully in our world until it was shut down. It still needed that link and connection, I guess, to Dimension X, because after the rift is closed, the Mind Flayer falls to pieces. It's unable to hold its form. Is this the Mind Flayer going rogue? Is it tired of waiting for Henry to accomplish its plans, and has it decided, as Thanos once said, "Fine, I'll do it myself"? An alternative way of thinking about it is that this was the pilot project. Season 1 has Will Byers get abducted, and Season 2, Will Byers returning to, we'll call it the prime material plane, results in some essence of Mind Flayer being released in the prime material, and thus constituting a big fleshy Mind Flayer monster. So maybe this was the trial run, the first plan, and it didn't go well. They still needed a connection to the Upside Down or the other world, so that plan failed. And then they come up with the plan that we see in Season 5, where they're going to abduct a bunch of children and break the rifts between the worlds and try to merge the worlds together. That must have been an awkward meeting. All right, Henry, the first plan didn't work out, but what we need to do is we need to get 12 kids and feed them Mind Flayer juice so they kind of got a little bit of psychic power and merge the realms. Do you know where we could find 12 kind of psychic kids? In fairness to Henry, there appeared to only be 11 kids in Hawkins' lab when he left there, and that's counting him, so he still would have been too short. So that's our Stranger Things Mind Flayer. That's their plan. Now, how does that line up with our Dungeons & Dragons Mind Flayer, and how hard is it going to be to match the two up? Turns out pretty difficult. Because Mind Flayers are powerful creatures, they might even have an inflated feeling of power after people played Baldur's Gate 3, but they're nowhere on par with beings like Vecna and the Demogorgon. So to contrive a reason that a Mind Flayer would have dominion over Vecna and a Demogorgon is gonna be a bit of heavy lifting, but not impossible, because where Mind Flayers have the advantage over creatures like Vecna particularly is their mastery of psionics, and the relationship between traditional Dungeons & Dragons magic and psionic magic might just be the glue we can use to merge all these disparate pieces together. Because the psionic powers are the place where we have the most overlap between Stranger Things Mind Flayer and Dungeons & Dragons Mind Flayer. They both have powerful psychic abilities, they can both invade people's minds, and they both operate on a hive mind. Mind Flayers generally operate on a large hive mind governed by an elder brain, similar to the way that the Mind Flayer operates in a hive mind in Stranger Things. So we can use these pieces to our advantage. This connects nicely to my next point. See, there's a bit of difficulty in arranging our Dungeons & Dragons pieces the same way our Stranger Things pieces are arranged, because we have to contrive a reason for Vecna to work with Mind Flayers. And the psychic powers, the psionic abilities, are an elegant way to approach this. Vecna is a master of the arcane. He is a wizard and a powerful lich. He is not a psionic spellcaster and has no psionic abilities in Dungeons & Dragons, unlike his Stranger Things counterpart. So, that is something the Mind Flayers have that Vecna does not in Dungeons & Dragons, and perhaps something that Vecna would want to claim for his own, and thus we can use the psionic abilities to get the two pieces to work together. So we've been introduced to most of our pieces, and now we just have to figure out how to put them together, but before we do that, we have one other kind of chaotic piece on the board. So you may have noticed that throughout Stranger Things, in addition to whatever horrible monster they're dealing with, there's also always a human element. The Hawkins Lab people in season 1 and 2, the Soviets in season 3, the Hawkins Lab people, the Soviets, the townspeople, and the military in season 4, because they figured why not everybody, and then the military again in season 5. Now, while all these people are not directly involved in the plans of Vecna and the Mind Flayer and the Demogorgons, they do act as a hindrance to fighting those threats. So this is an important plot point to keep in mind as we construct our narrative for the Forgotten Realms to match the events of Stranger Things, just so we can make everything match up nicely. Alright, so now we have all of our pieces assembled. We know everything that we need to incorporate to try and adapt the plot of Stranger Things to Faerun using their Dungeons & Dragons counterparts. So, let's begin. Our story begins with Vecna floating through the multiverse, pondering how to expand his power and increase his capabilities, in between moaning over his lost ex Kaz. And finally an idea starts to form. Back home in Greyhawk, Vecna heard relatively little about psionic spellcasters, but the words keep coming up more and more in his travels, and through his research he has found that these psionic spellcasters are occasionally not bound by conventional rules of magic. Even so, in places where magic does not exist, psionics continue to cast spells freely. This would be an incredible boost to Vecna's power. Not only a traditional arcane spellcaster of incredible ability and study, but a powerful psionic spellcaster who can act unbound by the conventional rules of magic. But how does one attain psionic abilities? Vecna reaches out to the most likely source. He finds a Mind Flayer colony, one governed by an elder brain. This particular elder brain is a cunning creature by the name of Zelagol. And Zelagol, initially cautious of the powerful Vecna, sees an opportunity to enrich his hive. So he hears Vecna out. Vecna desires the ability to use psionic magic. Zelagol knows of a way, but it requires a huge concentration of psionic energy. Normally, people are born with the gift. It is difficult for it to be taught. So, a plan is formed. Zelagol informs Vecna that this can be done, but it will require young, malleable minds that have latent psionic abilities that can then be sculpted and focused using the Mind Flayer's hive mind. With their focused combined efforts, these young potential psionic casters of the future can combine their powers with the guidance of the Elder Brain to unlock Vecna's own potential psionic ability. With this knowledge, a tenuous partnership is formed between Zelagol and Vecna in order to enrich Zelagol's hive and grant Vecna the power of psionic magic. Zelagol has not told Vecna everything, however. In fact, Zelagol is looking for young, potentially psionically gifted minds, because if a humanoid that is already particularly psionically gifted goes through seramorphosis, there is a chance that they will produce not a regular Mind Flayer, but an Ulitharid, creatures treated as minor godly beings in Illithid society. While there is little science to how Ulitharids are created, Zelagol believes that starting with psionically gifted hosts is an excellent place to begin, and has grand dreams of an army of Ulitharids enriching and creating one of the most powerful Mind Flayer hives that has ever been known. So the plan begins. Initially, Vecna settles down in a small town in southern Faerun, Moon, a place that nobody would notice, a town called Priapearl. In Priapearl there are many traveling merchants, and the town is large enough that a few missing people will not draw too much attention, and Vecna himself can operate in relative anonymity. He gets to work constructing a society of wizards with the goal of understanding psionic abilities. He sets them about the work of finding gifted children and testing and developing their psionic capabilities as best he can. Initially, progress is slow. The wizards in Vecna have a difficult time using their arcane magics to identify those who are psionically gifted. Vecna goes to Zelagal for help. Zelagal tells Vecna that minds with latent psionic ability are particularly good at resisting madness. So Vecna knows the one place, the creature in all the realms that inspires madness by its very presence. Vecna needs Demogorgon. But Demogorgon himself is a massive, powerful beast, difficult to control. Vecna is a strong enough wizard that he could summon Demogorgon and bring at least a powerful avatar of his to heal. However, it would draw too much attention. A 20-foot, two-headed monster causing madness everywhere he goes would draw too much attention to what Vecna is trying to accomplish here. However, Vecna knows of an unusual quirk of the Demogorgon. If a less powerful wizard attempts to summon Demogorgon, they will in fact summon a weaker, imperfect avatar of Demogorgon, one that still has its maddening gaze, but does not have the size, strength, and power of Demogorgon himself. He instructs some of his weaker followers to attempt to summon Demogorgon, and then send his imperfect avatar out into the night and find those who can resist his madness to bring into their research on psionic abilities. And that's how Season 1 begins. I'm gonna break this up into a couple of other videos and also see how this one does, but if you guys like what I'm laying out here and you're interested to see how I adapt the further seasons of Stranger Things to Dungeons & Dragons using the same creatures, let me know in the comments below. Let me know your thoughts and how you feel this all shakes out and how you feel the Dungeons & Dragons versions of the monsters relate to the Stranger Things versions of the monsters. And if you'd like to play D&D with me, you can join me over on startplaying.games, where I've got a bunch of different games available every week, looking for more players, and there's usually a seat open for you. That's it for now. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe, do all that at YouTube stuff, and we'll see you guys in the next video. Till then, puck out.